Delamere Dairy traces its roots back to 1927, founded by Lord Colmonley, the third Baron Delamere, a British settler in colonial Kenya. He established a dairy farm in Naivasha, introducing modern dairy farming techniques to the region. Delamere was among the first to produce yogurt in Kenya, a novelty at the time, laying the foundation for a brand that would become synonymous with quality dairy products in the country. This is the Truth Lab, and welcome to the insane story of Delamere. Ensure that you like, subscribe, and share the video if you most especially enjoy it. Lord Delamere, who was known as Colmonley, had just turned 28 in 1898 when he decided that he's gonna take a trip to Africa for the first time. And like other Europeans, Colmonley was attracted to Africa by the sheer prospect of having an adventure. Apart from wanting a break from his rather boring upbringing in the British side, a polite society, he also wanted to have a practical experience of the African continent, a break from his boring upbringing among the British bourgeois, the polite society. Before this decision, Lord Delamere had graduated from the prestigious Eton University. Education at Eton was full of praise for the high levels of European scientific achievements and civilization. The young, bold and restless Delamere hoped that an adventure to Africa would provide an opportunity to experience all this firsthand, what he imagined to be an equivalent of paradise. He heard the tales about big game and noble savages. Therefore, Delamere's first visit to Kenya was as a big game hunter. By the time he arrived from the direction of Somalia and Ethiopia, so many elephants were laying dead, and Delamere had collected ivory worth $14,000. He traveled back to Europe and came back in 1903, this time with greater imperialist fervor. The commissioner of Kenya at the time, Sir Charles Eliot, believed that more European settlers was the best strategy to provide the required wealth to defray the expense of colonial administration and to make the just completed Mombasa-Kisumu railway pay its way. Now appointed him as sub-collector and a land officer. Delamere used this position to obtain his own land. This was the father of land grabbing in Kenya. Yes, which was slightly over 100,000 acres on the floor of Rift Valley, within the precincts of the present-day Naivasha. After a few years, and following the removal of the Maasai from the area in 1904, he expanded the farm. At least this time, he now purchased it, almost doubling the initial acreage of the space he covered. He called his farm the Equator Ranch, and later Soisambu, which is still owned by his descendants till date. He meddled in politics to protect his own interest and those of other European farmers. At this time, Sir Charles Eliot was encouraging very many European settlers to settle in Kenya as immigrant farmers from Britain, New Zealand, Australia, and South Africa. Lord Delamere even influenced his own brothers-in-law, Galbraith and Beckley Cole, as he did other individuals who were his friends, to come over and occupy the land he believed had no owners, what gave birth to what we call the modern-day land grabbing. Lord Delamere even gave some of the pioneer farmers a few of his own livestock and seeds, and also money to start them off with farming. By this time, the land bank had not been established to give the settlers seed money. During those early years, to engage in large-scale farming entailed engagement in a lot of agricultural experiments, and Lord Delamere initially contemplated coffee production, but was immediately attracted to the rearing of sheep and cattle, and also cultivating wheat. He imported livestock from Britain and wheat from US. Unfortunately, both his livestock and wheat were not accustomed to local pests and diseases. Lord Delamere's stock, which by the outbreak of the First World War numbered 23,000 sheep and 1,600 cattle, greatly reduced in number due to diseases like rinderpest and pneumonia. The conditions were tough for his wheat too. Due to the incidences of diseases and pests, uncertainty grew among the settlers, and some of them opted to sell their land and go back home to try their luck in other things. But as for Delamere, his own persistence, vast financial resources, and assistance from the government, veterinary, and agricultural officers led to the ultimate success of him as a large-scale farmer in Kenya. His biographer, Elspeth Huxley, described him as an energetic, fiery, shrewd, aggressive, and visionary pioneer. Equally important to take note, Lord Delamere's success was largely attributed to the assistance that the colonial state accorded him. Historians have argued that from the onset of British rule in Kenya, the colonial state gave the European settler plantation agriculture good treatment at the expense of African peasant subsistence agriculture. They only gave large tracts and fertile tracts of land to European settlers. They collected hut taxes and poll taxes from Africans. The colonial state government also controlled the prices of marketing institutions, and they also supplied these settlers with forced and cheap African labor. They also dominated the policy-making organs. For instance, Lord Delamere was the chairman of the European Farming Community's political organization, the Planters and Farmers Association. He would later be appointed as one of the first 2 European members in the Legislative Council in 1907, and later in the 1920s he was the leader of the European settler community in Kenya. Apart from all these political states, Lord Delamere's experiments in dairy farming marked the beginning of Kenya's dairy industry. He introduced crossbreeding techniques and established the first flour mill in the country. His efforts transformed the agricultural landscape, making dairy a viable industry in Kenya. One fateful afternoon, I decided to have a snack of the Delamere yogurt. Once I had put the container in the trash bin, I became curious. Who was Lord Delamere, after whom Nairobi's main street was named for 3 decades? And as we speak today, Kenyatta Avenue at the center of Nairobi is one of the main streets. 6th Avenue was its first name, and it was renamed to be Delamere Avenue because in 1931, sadly, Lord Delamere passed. And as a way to honor his name, in the 1930s, 6th Avenue was changed to Delamere Avenue. Honestly, Delamere Avenue looked like a slice of London. This was the street's name for 3 years. But in 1964, 1 year after Kenya's independence, Delamere Avenue was renamed to Kenyatta Avenue in honor of Kenya's first president, Jomo Kenyatta. Delamere Dairies was then founded in 1927. Since they kept goat and dairy cattle, this was an attempt to market the farm's milk and its products. In fact, in a twist, this company was the first to introduce yogurt in East Africa. After Kenya's independence, the white settlers were leaving, but the descendants of Lord Delamere stayed back and even took Kenyan citizenship. They still run the family business today, and managing to extend control of the massive land holdings and maintaining the massive wealth that their father had acquired during the colonial period. Since Kenya wanted to cleanse itself from the legacy of its former colonial masters, it was only fair to rename Nairobi streets to freedom fighters and its African political leaders, and hence the switch from Delamere Avenue to Kenyatta Avenue. And while Delamere was a significant figure for white settlers, Jomo Kenyatta stood for a new independent and confident Africa. Early on, as president, Kenyatta privatized immense public wealth that was snapped up by Kenyatta. his family. Attaining independence was an opportunity for Jomo to enrich himself and his family. He was born into a poor Kikuyu family and became a very wealthy man. Today, the Kenyatta family is one of the richest in Kenya. In fact, his son Uhuru Kenyatta, the president of Kenya since 2013 to 2022, is considered the fourth wealthiest person in Kenya. And one of the biggest companies held by this family is Brookside Dairy Limited, that was founded in 1993. Controlling 45% of Kenya's dairy market, Brookside Dairies is the largest milk processing company in the country. The company makes powdered milk, fresh milk, yogurt, and butter, which are mostly distributed in Kenya, Tanzania, and Uganda. In 2014, a French yogurt maker, Danone, bought 40% stake in Brookside, while the Kenyatta family still holds 50% of its company. And in the year 2017, on one fateful day, the Brookside Dairy Limited bought the Delamere Yoghurt brand. And while the colonial Delamere branding state of their yogurt still continues under the family name, the ownership, the profits flow into the pockets of the Kenyatta's family. And here is where the story now develops a twist. Delamere was a symbol of the British colonial system, and Kenyatta was a symbol of Kenya's independence. Both managed to acquire excessive personal wealth by taking advantage of the system that they once helped create. And both Delamere and Kenyatta, having dynasties, managed to build dairy empires on those bases. And the merging of Brookside and Delamere just indicates that modern-day Kenya is slowly erasing the gap between post-colonial history and colonial history, and that the fruits of corruption of both systems is barely distinguishable. This has been the Truth Lab. Thanks for watching and stay here for my next videos.